Justin Jefferson was placed on IR earlier this morning for the Minnesota Vikings. So on today's show, we're going to be discussing the possibility if the Vikings could end up tanking for one of these quarterbacks in this year's upcoming draft. You got names like JJ McCarthy, Caleb Wiliams, obviously the top dog, Drake Maye, Shador. There's a ton of names out there. To be kind of breaking them all down here after the Jefferson injury news. Then also going over some trade candidates for the Vikings at the back half of today's show. So make sure you guys tuned in. My name is Patrick Siepman. Welcome to the Vikings now. But before we dive into the latest around Jefferson, we are in a sub-battle this week. There is still a football game that is going to be played this Sunday without number 18 on this Vikings unit. Hey, we're in a sub-battle with our Bears Now channel. We picked up 54 subs yesterday. They picked up 73. Let's beat them by Sunday. If you guys are new here, hit that sub button. We'll keep you posted with all Jefferson injury news and the latest around the Vikings. Lock us in and subscribe today. Let's kick it to Adam Schefter here. He had the first tweet coming in at 7:53 a.m. He said more about Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson missing at least 4 games. This is when he was breaking the news. But this was an interesting tweet that I wanted to get to from Schefter. He said, here is the unspoken issue that could potentially lengthen Justin Jefferson's absence. If the Vikings don't win games and stay competitive, what is Jefferson's incentive to rush back when he did not land the contract he wanted? His absence could last longer than expected. I agree with Shefty. The fact that the Vikings did not extend Jefferson this offseason, I've been saying it for multiple weeks now, and now I think it even has more kind of a backing behind this take. I think it is one of the worst mistakes that a GM has made. Because now going in the next season, Jamar Chase is going to get extended. Well, he's going to want to get paid more than him. And now Jefferson could kind of sit back and say, you know what, I'm going to wait until the next offseason and test the market because he knows a team would throw a ton of money at a guy who is off to a great start during this season. I mean, obviously he got shut down a little bit last week, only went for about 30 yards, but he's still leading the league in receiving, 571 yards, 16 yards per catch. He has been one of the best receivers in the league since he entered, and he's only in year 4, and he's continued to get better and better every season, and he is the focal point of this Vikings offense, and that kind of gets me to this conclusion. The season is over. I hate saying it, but call a spade a spade. The Vikings aren't winning any more games without Justin Jefferson on the field. Yes, they could still go into Chicago and get a win, but then you got San Fran coming in the next week. They're going to blow the brakes off or blow the doors off you, and I just necessarily think the season is over, and this could be a very long season for Minnesota Vikings. But I don't think this is the worst thing ever. And yes, it does look, sleek right now, and it's not, the best feeling in the world. But, the Vikings have been stuck in this purgatory for a very long time where they're not good enough to compete for Super Bowls, but they're not bad enough to draft a franchise quarterback. I don't necessarily think this is the worst thing in the world considering how stacked this draft class is. If you get one of these young quarterbacks and you pair him up with a franchise left tackle, franchise tight end, franchise wide receiver, and another great wide receiver in Jordan Addison, I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world. And you got Kirk on a 1-year deal. So I understand, sucks right now, but it could get very fun and a lot more interesting when the offseason hits. And we could be talking about the Vikes potentially drafting a guy like Drake Maye, who we'll get into in here in a second. But I do want to show some love to number 18 because he's a competitive SOB, and I am too. And it just stinks to not have him on this Vikings team for at least the next 4 games, and I think potentially for the rest of the season. So make sure you guys show him some love down in the comment section. Type his jersey number, type those 18s, show the best weapon in the NFL, your support down in the comment section. And now coming up next here on the show, we are going to be talking about Caleb Wiliams and talking about some trade candidates for the Vikings. I think they actually have a lot more guys than people think that could be shipped out, but that's coming up here in a second. But first, I do want to give a huge shout out to Prize Picks. I'm super excited to tell you about our new sponsor here at Vikings Now, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Instead of battling versus thousands of players, including pros and sharks, you just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. You can actually make some plays on this upcoming weekend. I'm taking the more on Brock Purdy at 236.5 yards. He just killed the Cowboys. I think he's going to kill the Cleveland Browns this upcoming weekend. Same thing with Tua. He just killed the Giants. I think he's going to kill the Panthers again, going more on 285.5 for him as well. Make sure you guys get hooked up with Prize Picks today. Go to prizepicks.com WR_CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Make sure you guys get hooked up today. So if the draft were to happen tomorrow, right now the Vikings are currently selecting 4th in next year's draft, which is a pretty good spot to be in, considering their 1-4 record. And listen, there's a bunch of good quarterbacks in this year's upcoming draft, and having a top 5 pick could be huge. And listen, the schedule doesn't get easier for the Minnesota Vikings, especially without Justin Jefferson. The bookmakers out west put the Bears-Vikings odds at, I think it was about 2 last time I saw, in the Vikings' favor. Listen, Vikings always struggle in Chicago. I would probably assume they're going to drop that one. The Niners, there's no chance the Vikings win that game without Jefferson. Even though the Packers just lost to the Raiders, I could chalk that up as a loss as well. Same with the Falcons. I mean, they're playing good football down there in Atlanta right now. That's going to be a tough game. And the Saints, I mean, hey, Saints got a good defense. They might be able to shut this team down. So schedule does not get easier here. And you still got 2 games against the Lions, who look like a very good football team. Maybe the Vikings are winning 3, 4, 5 games this year. And maybe if Jefferson does sit out the year, it could get pretty sleek. But I do want to go over some quarterbacks potentially that the Vikings could be drafting. And it starts off with the top dog. Yes, it is an outside chance that the Vikings do get Caleb Wiliams. However, the Bears and the Panthers are probably going to have the Bears are going to have the first 2 picks probably in this year's NFL draft. Since they do have the Panthers pick. And hey, maybe if the Vikings lose to the Bears this weekend, I think that might be the best case scenario for this football team, because then they would jump the Bears in the draft order. And I know there's an outside chance, but if you could pair him up with Jordan Addison, could be sweet. Here's a guy that I'm most interested in. He's a young Justin Herbert. Drake Maye. Drake Maye is fantastic. He would be number 1 undisputed if it wasn't for the dude to the left of him on your screen, Caleb Wiliams. And listen, Drake Maye, I'm a big fan of his game. Big arm, big body, 6'4". I like him. I think it would be sweet pairing him up with Jefferson and the boys here in Minnesota. He is somebody to look out for if the Vikings could somehow get that 2nd pick. But then you kick it to a guy like JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. I'm a big fan of JJ, really intellectual player. He's a sneaky good athlete, great 40 time. I'm sure he's going to test well. JJ, good player, won throughout college. I would love for the Vikings to take him if maybe they're sitting through like 5 to 10. I think he's a good option. And then we kick it to Deion's kid, Shedeur. And listen, I think he's going to come back for another year of college football to play with Travis Hunter again. He's going to be able to make, a ton of money during NIL, but how sweet would it be to see him in the purple and gold with Justin Jefferson? The Vikings would be one of the most fun teams in the NFL to watch. But my overall conclusion, this draft class is absolutely loaded. Listen, this is honestly, like I said at the top of the show, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world for the Vikings to, maybe embrace a tank here because of how loaded this draft class is. Ton of good quarterbacks. Not the end of the world. Obviously, the season is necessarily over, but, just stinks. But I'll ask you guys this question right now. Should the Vikings tank? Are you in the camp that the Vikings should start tanking, or do you think they should try to tough this out, win a couple games of the next 4, get Jefferson back? I don't know. I'm probably going to be typing my Y's for yeses, but you guys let me know. Y for yes, N for no down in the comments section. But now let's dive into it. Some Vikings that could be on the trade block. Listen, we'll go over this pretty fast because, again, trades in the NFL, they're a lot more likely nowadays than they were in the past. But, again, not the most likely scenario. But here's 6 guys that I think could be dealt. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is the main one. I mean, you've seen the Jets and Falcons linked to him, but he does have a no-trade clause. So it does make it a little sticky. Ezra Cleveland, he's been playing great. A lot of teams could potentially be calling about him. I would want the Vikings to keep him, good interior offensive linemen don't come around too often, and the Vikings do have. So Harrison Phillips, he's an interesting one I think that can move if another team needs a D lineman. And it's Danielle Hunter and Marcus Davenport. They're both on expiring deals. Teams love trading for edge rushers at the trade deadline. And then obviously Jordan Hicks. Maybe they move him, try to get Ivan Pace and Brian Asamoah some more reps. But also with all these guys in trade block, you're going to want to get more draft capital. Like, let's just say the Vikings do somehow win a couple games, and they're drafting 7th or 8th. You're going to want to use some of those picks to go trade up and maybe get a guy like a Drake Maye, get a guy like JJ, or whoever it may be, whoever this GM and head coach fall in love with. So get more draft capital. Stinks, man. Season's necessarily over. But, hey, we're going to keep you guys covered no matter what it is. So make sure you guys do give me a follow on Twitter at PatSeeps. We tweet about the Vikings all year long, even if this season does get a little depressing. But make sure you guys give me a follow on Twitter at PatSeeps. See you guys next time. Let's go Vikes.